Hello everyone and welcome to a new video, and the final one. This time we'll be taking a look at legendary Corrin. I know this video is late, which is why I'm not covering the banner itself as the banner is gone, but I'll be covering Corrin herself. I'm sorry it's late, it's mostly because when Friday and Saturday came, I just wanted to rest. I had an extremely tiring week, so I wanted to just rest. So I did not work on the video, and Sunday I ended up streaming, so again could not really work on the video. I was basically done streaming at like 10 PM or so. I had basically no time to really start working on something. So I was done working on the video on Friday. It was too late for me to record, so I didn't. It's literally 3 AM right now. This is like the only time I have to really record. So to be fair, I should have recorded like 2 hours ago, but when you have like no motivation to do something, it is so hard to force yourself to do it. So it kind of just ended up getting late. This is completely my fault, so you know, that's just kind of how it is. But yeah, I'll be talking about Corrin, and I'll also be talking about the legendary heroes I did not cover on the last tier list. Well, the last video I made, which I only covered the legendary heroes that were present on the banner itself. This time I'll be covering everyone else, so this is going to be still a pretty lengthy video. Sorry for those who wanted to have the banner as well, but it just wasn't meant to be. I kind of did as much as I could, but yeah. This is going to be my final video. Also, I should just point this out. Well, final video for analysis. This is going to be basically my final video for analysis, but I might still come back to do something like show me your build after maybe like a month or two, because I do want to just relax for a while. Just, you know, catch up with friends. Maybe watch a few series with like people on Discord and play games with people again on Discord. Just in general, just have fun, you know. The thing that I was not really able to do in far too long. Anyway, enough about me. Let's talk about Corrin, or as I like to call her, basically a hooker with a baby's face on it. That's just what it is. Sancha's art just does not fit Corrin. At least not for faces. But whatever. When it comes down to a unit, I did say and preface this in saying that Corrin would be not as bad as Crom, but might as well be just as bad. And yes, she basically is. There are ways to counter her, obviously just beating her in speed, for example, but it's not always that easy. Keep in mind, I'm mostly looking at this from the point of view of someone doing AA, because that's where you'll encounter her way more often than like in fucking AR or anywhere else, because in AR she has very specific problems. And no, it's not just like being weak to dragons. But yeah, so when it comes down to Corrin, why I said that she was going to be basically just as annoying as Crom is very simple. You are looking at a dragon that effectively has a weapon that has cooldown -1 and 20 points of stats, and she has 182 BST. For those who don't know, after your first merge, she has the same BST as Brave Edelgard, except she's an infantry unit. Yeah, she has basically more BST than Legendary Edelgard, by the way, if you're wondering. She has a BST bin over her, for literally no reason. I believe she can actually score the same amount as Legendary Edelgard and Crom, which, you know, that's just great. So you'll encounter her a lot if you actually are doing AA, like, very competitively. I've stopped myself because it's at a point where it's becoming too expensive to really just cover with like all of these really frustrating units to deal with. But you know, if you're still going for that AA Golden Goose, then that's definitely going to be a unit to look out for, because you'll come across her on win season constantly. You'll find her about as often as you'll find Crom, I believe. And the main things you can do to deal with her is to enemy phase her with a character that has more speed than her. But again, keep in mind this is AA, so typically you're going to have +0 unit trying to deal with a +10 Corrin. And also Corrin will typically be paired up, if you're scoring pretty high, with Legendary Eliwood, who basically will ensure that Corrin will always get like +12 attack and defense unless you panic her, which thankfully is semi-easy. But still, considering rally speed res is very much a thing, then she becomes basically impossible to double unless you actually panic her. That's kind of a problem, because the weapon already gives 5 speed, then you have +10, and you have typically people who are going to go speed plus, because speed meta, wow. And, you know, with the buffs, you basically are at 44 speed with speed plus, Merges pushes that to 48, then Flowers pushes that to 49, the weapon pushes that to 54, and then a speed buff to 60, and if Legendary Eliwood is on the party, then that's 66 speed. Speed might be a bit of an issue then, you know, just saying. And you can't just be like, oh, but Jay, you just have to use a Dragon Killer, it's so easy. If you have 70 attack on a Dragon Killer, you do not kill her. To put this in perspective, the only Dragon Killer that will consistently kill her outside of, you know, Dragon Killer you invest 1,000,000 points into their attack, is going to be Legendary Julia, who is a Earth type, so in other words, you have to hope that it's Wind Earth to use her in AA. Because in case you don't know, which for some reason people don't know, you are limiting yourself to any of the active season if you wish to score well in that mode. You gain an extra point every time, and those extra points do count quite a bit. It's basically 28 points per run if you actually have nothing but, you know, if it's Wind Earth, nothing but Wind Earth unit, and like whatever combo of Astra, Anima, or Light and Dark is. These are basically the units you're going to be lucked with, which means you need an insanely huge roster, and you need to have specific counters prepared for every season combos. So typically for Corrin, you'll be blessing them for wind. For Crom, you'll be blessing them for water, for example. And just hope to hell that it's going to be enough. AA is a lot harder than people seem to think. It really is a lot harder. And I don't understand why people think AR is genuinely harder, when at this point you can just like take a unit, buff it with like 4 other unit and just win. It's just kind of silly to me, but that's just me. But yeah, all that to say, Negating Fang is the reason why the 70 attack Dragon Killers don't kill her. To put it in perspective, if you find a base kit Corrin in AA, it's very difficult to come out of that without losing a unit, especially if that's paired up with Legendary Eliwood, which, you know, again, 66 speed. Very easy to deal with, right? So yeah. Negating Fang. The few ways you have to deal with this are either you have a special that just outdoes the damage. For example, one of the best counter for Corrin is Nagi, because Nagi has colorless advantage and dragon effectiveness. So what you can do is run special fighter. I keep confusing spiral and fighter for some reason. Special fighter with glimmer. So you get hit because, you know, shield pulse. There's no, you cannot use low attack res or any of such skills. What ends up happening is that they give you 2 charge, so you get glimmer ready, and then you proc glimmer. Glimmer will combat the Negating Fang. So for example, I have an unmerged Nagi that's not attack plus, so 56 attack, right? Combat Triangle will push that to 67, and then Dragon Effectiveness will push that to 100. Which you might be like, oh, but at plus 10 with like everything, not even like Legendary Eliwood, I mean, you're like at 38 res with a buff 44 res. You do 56 damage. You clearly kill, right? You don't kill. You know why? You know why? Here's why. Because you do... Basically, you'll have 100 attack. And she's going to have 38, 44, so 56 damage. So, with 56 damage... 19 of that is gone because of negating Fang. 5 of that is gone because of Shield Pulse. You are effectively doing 32 damage. You missed your kill. If you have Glimmer, your damage will jump back up to 48, so you'll get the kill. If you miss the kill, she'll just destroy you. That's just kind of how it is. Even with colorless disadvantage, that doesn't matter. Corrin hits insane amounts of attack. And her pref is way too easy to work with. Cooldown -1 is a bitch, and also so is attack speed def res +5. The main thing you can really have, the main thing that I'm actually glad about though, is the fact that, well, she can have Ruptured Sky. Because if she had Ruptured Sky on top of everything, it's just annoying. But at the same, well, actually no, she would have Negating Fang. My bad. But Negating Fang also gives her 18 damage, so if she doubles you, what ends up happening is she gets an extra like 18 to 20 plus damage. So you can kind of imagine how annoying that is. But yeah, just in general, this is very frustrating to deal with. Like I said, Nagi is a good example. You can also use Legendary Tiki with a very similar setup, purely because Dragon Effectiveness plus Glimmer kind of carries through. Though I think Tiki might be a bit iffy in cases because her attack is not the best. But yeah, like those are good counters. Again, you can just outspeed her, face tank her, so she doesn't get to actually have the chance to just be like, oh, but I hit you again, and this time with 20 extra damage. If you just let her attack you and then you hit back twice, basically her special is just damage reduction and nothing else, which is a lot more easy to deal with. The problem is having basically 56 plus speed is not easy, and if Legendary Eliwood is on there, then it's basically a lost cause. It's very annoying to deal with. Again, Legendary Julia one-shots basically in any scenario because Corrin cannot buff. And you have like 80 plus attack. Well, actually, no. I'm considering a plus 10 Julia here because I'm so used to dealing with her. No, it's more like 77 attack, which tends to be good enough. Because, again, Corrin cannot buff. This is the key difference. But yeah. Overall, very annoying unit to deal with. Low attack speed is a good way to also trip her over if you have to deal with Eliwood, by the way, because that just gets rid of the bonus doubler altogether for the speed and whatever other stat you remove. Another counter would be Brave Lucifia. Yet another reason why Brave Lucifia is as good as she is. Because the idea is if you're under full HP, okay, you get to do 2 hits. The first hit will get Negating Fang. The second hit will do full damage. So this is a good way to deal with her. Another counter, which I've pointed out in the video because they literally had her for sale 3 times at the same time as Corrin was up. Not slimy at all, right? Which you want. aka Halloween Mia if you use the Forma, or Witchy 1 if you use that on any other unit. If you have any Witchy 1 or Melancholy, bless them to Wind, because what you can do with that is effectively just shut down Negating Fang, because you have to realize she has to use Shield Pulse to be annoying, at least if you have to deal with them. If you have Corrin, like, if it's in the end of the player, what you can do to get around not having Shield Pulse is to have someone like Raphael, who gives a charge to the unit he's supporting, so that way you can get 1 charge and then Infantry Pulse, which allows you to just have Negating Fang ready. Thankfully, this is not something you'll have to deal with outside of potentially AR defenses with Infantry Pulse, which that would be really annoying to deal with, because basically attacking into her would be extreme danger. Letting her attack is also dangerous, because then if her B slot is open, low attack speed, low attack res. Not exactly the safest things to have to deal with, is it? But yeah, so in general, those are very dangerous sets to deal with in AR. Purely because then she becomes very difficult to one-shot outside of Astra Season. And even then in Astra Season it can be a bit iffy, but thankfully you can just super buff your unit to like 90 attack, it's fine. AR is not very difficult, so I mean, that's just kind of how it is. You just buff your unit to hell and back and you win. Unless it's Brahman, which Brahman is an absolute pain in the ass to deal with, but that's just kind of how it is. But yeah, another counter is the upcoming Resplendent unit, which is base Alm, because base Alm is just able to have a Brave Falchion. The first hit gets negated, the second doesn't. So you can just be able to get the kill that way. Very easy to make. Just Death Blow 3, and that's all you really need with the Refine. Other than that, Naga paired up with any Brave weapon is a very good example. Brave Bow is a fantastic example, especially with something like Gemkey, because, I mean, at that point Gemkey is able to deal with other things, not just Corrin, because he just has that much attack. At least if you actually built him. Mine is going to hit 70 attack the second we have the Trait Fruit, for example. With a Brave Bow, by the way, on top of like over 50 speed. You know, as you do. But yeah, those are like the main counter I wanted to talk about, because if you're like me, dealing with legendary heroes is always the most dreadful things, because you either get like a unit that's pretty decent and not too annoying, like legendary Seliph, or you get Corrin and Crom, which, by the way, those are the two units that were sandwiching Seliph on his release. Was Crom before, it was Corrin after. It almost feels like FE4 is not very liked. Thank you, I'm so glad, Mr. Director Chan. Meanwhile, Maeda, just stroking his dick as he thinks about Corrin and the fact that this is her 9th alt. She has more alt than Camilla. Nobody speaks about it because it's male and female. It's the same character. They don't act any different from one another. It's not like Robin, where there's at least some difference. But whatever. It's just whatever. As far as comparison goes, the only one you can really compare her to is Fallen Corrin. Now, let me just put this as simple and nice as I can. Fallen Corrin has no purpose. There is no reason you should ever invest in Fallen Corrin anymore because of this one. And this is rare I say this, because legendary heroes are a lot more expensive in general than the, 5-star units like Fallen Corrin is. But let me put this in perspective. She scores 2 BST bin over, whatever. The main thing to keep in mind, Savage Breath. You lose stats every time you want to have a unit buffing you, so, like, it has to be Yato, for example, for you to get actual stats up, or Brave Lucina. But Brave Lucina cannot buff her, so you're basically stuck to it Yato boy. Or Kaden, but Kaden can be a bit of a problem if you get panicked or anything of the sort. So it's very iffy to work with, whereas Corrin keeps all the stats she gets, and she has cooldown -1 on top of it. Do you kind of see the problem here? Because yeah, Fallen female Corrin cannot really receive support all that well. This one can. This is the key difference here. Negating Fang is not that great in the end of the player. I will say that. Because in the end of the player, first off, you're not a +10 versus a +0. Unless you actually spend a hell of a lot on Corrin. But 2, because it doesn't give you any sustain. It makes you very tanky, yes. but it gives you no sustain. And that's a bit of a problem for Corrin. Keep in mind, by the way, I did not mention this, but the weapon also gives you 2 charge when you attack. The idea is, you get hit, this skill proc, she hits back, she gets 2 charge back, Negating Fang is ready again. If she one-shot her, good, Negating Fang is ready. If she didn't one-shot, well, typically it's because guaranteed follow-up for the second hit that they will do. And it's going to be ready to negate again, and then you'll hit again because she just has that much speed. I mean, in general, if you're looking at a unit and you want to have a unit that in general will be a fantastic tank that can deal with both def and res, this is pretty much like one of the best options you have, but there's a key problem here. Just like Dimitri, sustain is not exactly the best and the best thing for Corrin. Let me put it this way. First off, Spurn, all of that out of the way. Dragons and beasts can't use that because, you know, reasons. It's not like dragons are kind of not that great anymore to begin with, but whatever. Anyway, so Spurn cannot be used. And by the way, just want to point that out, right? Spurn would not be that much more annoying on female Corrin, because that would mean Negating Fang would be trash. Unless you like use Infantry Pulse with Negating Fang on top of Spurn, which would be extremely sadistic, but I mean, it could work. But I don't really see that being too feasible for most players. But anyway, yeah, all that aside, Spurn is not an option, so you lose, you know, survivability from that to some extent. But also, more importantly, Negating Fang lowers damage, but you have no way to recover. That's kind of a huge problem, because if you have no way to recover, you'll just get whittled down to death. Someone who has sustain will be able to survive a lot longer, especially if that sustain is accompanied with actual damage, unlike Dimitri. But essentially the idea here is, yes, you're colorless, yes, you're extremely tanky, but no sustain. The only thing you can really do is run Aether, and thank God you have cooldown -1 for that until you realize Brave Lucina cannot be used with her. The only thing you could use to combo into Corrin to have perma Aether with like special spiral is sadly Infantry Pulse. Not Infantry Pulse, Infantry Breath, my bad. Which is very awkward to work with, and just in general makes the unit not sound too great for being a main tank. Also, Dragon Effectiveness, but I do want to point this out. Dragon Effectiveness is not that big of a problem if you have Duo Idun, because Duo Idun can just shut down any Dragon Effectiveness for 1 turn. So if there is a Dragon Effective unit, you can just have Duo Idun come in, use her, you know, or Duo skill, and then just support with like drives or something. And that's all you really need. Because after that 1 turn, after dealing with that 1 dragon killer like Threzir, you're in the clear. There's nothing they can really do against you. And unlike something like Dimitri, where Threzir is actually kind of a hard counter to Dimitri, Corrin is colorless. She'll just one-shot Threzir as a result. Because she is going to have an adaptive weapon with over 80 attack. By the way, this is with no support. Okay? This is not with any support whatsoever. She has about 81 attack with like Mirror Stance, I believe? So yeah, very bulky unit. Fallen Corrin is kind of just redundant at this point is all. But yeah, if you already have Fallen Corrin, then in some ways the generic Corrin is kind of pointless. If you have like Fallen Corrin like merged up. Because I mean, do you want to merge up another unit to get something similar out of it? Probably not, but yeah. So Aether at the end of the day will be good with Special Spiral purely because 4 cooldown. The only problem, like I said, is you won't be able to proc Aether on the first hit. And that's kind of a problem. But at the same time, because it's a 4 cooldown, and actually I should just go to build. It's the set to the right. Because you have it's a 4 cooldown and you have so much attack, because here you have 68 attack, right? Primordial Breath pushes that to 73. Joint Drive Attack to 77. Mirror Stance to 81. So it's very easy to one-shot an enemy, and then on the next encounter your Aether will be ready, so you'll be able to just one-shot that one and heal yourself up. If you just hit and you don't kill and then proc to kill them, you'll heal a whole lot less, so it's very far from ideal. As for the set on the left, it's literally base kit. Yeah, I'm not really taking the piss here. That's literally just a really good set to run in general. It's very annoying to get killed by. It's very annoying because you can't really get killed easily. If you have Mirror Stance, Joint Drive Attack, and Oppref, you're at 81 attack. So the idea is, you get hit, you take almost no damage because Shield Pulse and, you know, Primordial Breath, stats, and Negating Fang. But then, to add insult to injury, you'll be getting 30% of your attack into damage. That's 24, by the way. So, you typically will kill whatever just attacked you. It's a very annoying unit to deal with, and Shield Pulse makes it instantly ready. Like I said, like I said before, when it comes down to Shield Pulse, you can substitute it with Infantry Pulse and stuff, because she basically will regen her own shield, her own charges by her weapon, just by attacking. With just something like Raphael or Veloria, they will give you the charge you need to go to just keep going like that. So this is a good option. Keep in mind also, again, I've said this before, Legendary Eliwood, very good unit to go with, since Vision of Arcadia requires you to have a dragon to begin with. So I mean, comboing the two of them works really well, considering she has a whole lot of attack. Her stat line with bonus doubler is ridiculous. Like right now she has 49 def and 48 res, right? Bonus doubler pushes that to 55 def and 54 res. Very bulky already. And speed-wise, you'll be at 56 speed. As for attack, you'll be at 87. So, I mean, it works really well. What can I say? So, yeah. In general, just very obnoxious unit to deal with. Not so good in the player's hand, as I've said before, because it's very awkward to work with due to the cooldown -1. Keep in mind, another option you can use to go with Aether, to go instead of Aether, I should say, is Soul. Soul is a 3 cooldown, so essentially you don't need Special Spiral, but Special Spiral will be a good option if you want Soul to be consistent at healing you. If you're fine without that, you can also just use Noontime instead, and instead of Special Spiral, use low attack res, which is a way to deal with buffs. Or, I know some people would like to say this for AR, Quick Riposte, because Quick Riposte lets you break impact effects, but I mean, you can also use Null Follow-Up for that matter. Or Null See Disrupt if you're afraid of casters, but I'm gonna be honest, healers in AR are not that common, which is very strange because stuff like Panic Staff is very annoying to deal with, but for some reason they're nowhere to be seen, so Null Follow-Up will typically serve you better in that mode for whatever reason, purely because impact skill are very annoying to deal with. But yeah, that's kind of all I have to say here. Just in general, very good unit in the AI's hand. In the player's hand, it's a lot more iffy. Noontime has so many problems, and so does Soul. Since you don't get any damage, and it's all about your attack. Thankfully, in Corrin's case, she is colorless, so she doesn't have color to deal with, which makes her attack a whole lot more consistent than something like Dimitri, or literally any fucking unit with a color, let's be honest. Because... And I'm using mostly Dimitri because I argued a lot in the comment for the Choose Your Legend banner about like the problem Dimitri faces. One of the big one is dealing with colors. If you deal with colors and you don't have a damaging special, it hurts you a lot. Like, for example, if you have 85 attack, you're down to 68. It's so much easier with sturdy impact to tank that. And if you're Thrasier, Blue Lion Rule does nothing. If you have to deal with a sturdy impact Thrasier, even unmerged, 85 attack does not kill, because you are down to 68. So, you know, her weapon will give her 4 defense, and sturdy impact will give her 10 defense, so you're at 37 defense with 41 HP. That's 78 bulk. That's literally 13 points behind what Dimitri would bring. So, for example, you would need 98 attack, I think, or 97 to be able to one-shot. It's, not too great. Not too great. Just in general, like, oh, you need basically the attack cap to be able to kill that one unit. Are you real? Yes. It's like, what? It's very ridiculous that we're getting to this point, but it is what it is. But yeah, Corrin doesn't have that issue. If you have to deal with, like, sturdy impact Thrasier, first off, doesn't matter, adaptive damage, and 2, no color to deal with, so you'll still just one-shot. Again, you need Duo Idun to deal with Thrasier consistently because of Dragon effectiveness, but other than that, I mean, it makes you very consistent is all. But yeah, now let's talk about the Legendary Mythic tier list. I've put Corrin in S tier because, again, she's very annoying in the AI's hand, but in the end of the player, she's very awkward to work with. I do think she's, I don't want to say better than Dimitri, but in a lot of cases, she will be able to deal with a lot more dangerous units, especially, you know, when color is involved, way easier. But she runs into a few issues herself, so there's that. Just keep in mind, because of cooldown -1, which does the same thing as Mistletoe, she just needs to get hit once, and a skill proc with Noontime. Wow. I don't understand why Mistletoe effect is so good that people are like, man, makes it so godlike. It's like, I mean, he's kind of restraining himself to 2 cooldown skills, and you can't use Brave Lucina to change that. Yikes. It's just yikes to me. Anyway, with that aside, let's talk about these units, shall we? I'll go from top left to the bottom. I'm going to go back and forth with an image of the characters I did actually speak about already, because this is going to be a very lengthy one. I'm very sorry for people who just want to see a specific character. I hope someone can do timestamps for this, because I was meant to do like 8, 9 a month, but I'm going to have to cover like 30 of them, so this is going to be very lengthy. Legendary Eliwood. I've already covered Altina in the other video. In fact, if there's any characters that I do not cover on this video, it's probably because I covered them in the last Legendary Banner video, okay? So just keep that in mind. So, Legendary Eliwood. He's basically considered one of the best buffer of this game. The only condition you really need is to have a dragon on your team, which is very easy to fulfill. And he basically is able to buff all stats together. If you have Speed, Res, Rouse to combo into Visions of Arcadia on your highest attack unit, it is utterly insane. Or Speed, Res, Link if you have something like Legendary Lucina being one of the unit that's tied in attack. For example, there's my Nagi, Legendary Lucina, as well as Mordecai team comp that I use that all reach 58 attack. They all get buffed by this effect. This is a very strong effect. Bonus doubler in general is no slouch, and having an extra 6 attack and death is insane. This covers the entire map, by the way, so no range limit. It's literally just, if Eliwood exists and you have the highest attack on the map, you get the buff. That's it. So if everyone on the map have the same attack, This means if one gets shield attack, everyone gets shield attack, which means everyone keeps their buff anyway, because the only attack that's not considered is Ellie Woods. So yeah, this is kind of insane in general. Which is why he's there. He's also pretty decent as a Gale Forcer, though obviously this is not the main thing he's known for, but he can Gale Force on top of providing support, which is insane. Next up is Mirabilis. Mirabilis is one of the dancers, and personally I think she's better than Peony. Here's the reason why. Penalty negation is the only way to really deal with her, whereas Peony, the main thing you have to do to deal with her is lulls, and lulls are extremely common, especially in stuff like AR. It is at a point that Blade Tome's teams are basically dead on arrival in a lot of cases, which is extremely sad because, you know, it's some of the most free-to-play friendly things, but you can't really use them in AA because, hey, look, it's Legendary Chrom with his low attack def. Oh, look, it's Legendary Julia with light and dark. Oh, look, Legendary Alm with low attack def. Oh, Legendary Leaf with low attack def. Do I make my point clear? It's like some of the most used skills, so Peony is a lot worse as a result. Mirabilis is also giving more than just like the 3 attack and speed on top of the 3 across the board. Mirabilis gives you 5 attack and decrease the enemy's attack by 5. Now, a lot of people misunderstand how the weapon works. Essentially, anyone within 4 space of her, which is huge by the way, will get the -5 attack. However, here's the thing that makes it even more busted. Anyone within 2 space of the people that got hit by that -5 attack will also get hit by that -5 attack. So basically, just think of it like a fucking shockwave, and everyone in the shockwave just basically become a shockwave themselves of debuffs. This is extremely insane when paired up with something like Gangrel. Because, for example, this is a very easy debuff to apply. Gangrel is utterly insane the second debuffs are applied, because you end up with something like 10 true damage, you end up with something like 4 across the board, you end up with basically 5 def and res because they lost the 5 attack, you got 5 attack yourself, so that's 5 more damage for you. It's just kind of obnoxious, and also because of Mirabilis' weapon, which is honestly better than what Peony got, you do -3 attack, def, and res. So I think you can kind of see where it's coming. So basically you get to a point where you can just kill something, and if you have another dancer, because Mirabilis will have been danced by now, you can dance, and then like that unit is going to get obliterated with the -7 defense, -3 def from Mirabilis, -5 attack from Mirabilis, like +4 across the board for Gangrel, true damage of +10 damage. I think I've made my point. I don't think I have to go like further than this, but like this, Gangrel is definitely one of the best user of it. Another really frustrating user to deal with is Kyria, or any of the character that does attack def -6. Legendary Chrom, for example, is obnoxious with this, because what ends up happening is, you know how annoying he is to kill in 1 round? Well, some of you don't because you don't do AA at a high level, but in AA, he genuinely is so cancerous. Low in is a bad counter to Chrom, because he is consistently unable to kill with life and death. So that gives you an idea of how insanely tanky this boy gets. And that's if you're not dealing with the 56 speed variant of Chrom, because yes, that's a thing. But yeah, so if you combo this with Mirabilis, your enemy lose 5 attacks already there. That's a bit of a bad position, because you're debuffed. He's probably buffed. You can't buff against him, you can't debuff him, and on top of that, if they are like around Mirabilis' range for a weapon, they lose 3 attack, def, and res on top of it. So low attack def, Mirabilis' weapon, and Chrom's breath does -12 attack defense. You can't buff, you can't debuff him, you will take a debuff. Do I make my... Do I give you a good idea of how frustrating it is to play around Mirabilis with these types of units? I hope so, because if I haven't made the point clear, then I don't know where to go at this point. Next up is Rid. Rid is one of the best Gale Forcer in the game. All you need to do is to have a debuffer. Again, Mirabilis is a fantastic unit to combo into this. But you can also combo him into Gunthra, so you have 2 wind unit. And they both have a specific type of chill, which can then also be comboed into, say, Loot and Saizo, for example, which all really gain from debuffs. And Loot is really good at providing debuffs. So that makes him very consistent at doubling. The only problem he runs into is having too much attack. I'm saying this from experience. My Rid is plus 10, and he has 65 attack unbuffed. So that gives you an idea. With a buff, you're at 71 attack. It's very easy to one-shot something and just not get enough charge, which is one of the most frustrating things. But keep in mind also, all he really needs is 1 unit to be debuffed, because then he can just initiate on them, double them, kill them, proc attack smoke, and then anything within that range will basically be unable to double unless they have a null follow-up effect or guaranteed follow-up effect. So they won't be able to double, you'll be able to double. It makes Rid a pain in the ass to deal with, when you're debuffed anyway. And it makes him a very annoying unit for Gale Force, very good for AR defense, because then typically your unit's going to be able to tank him, right? But that's just the problem. Then he's going to survive because you lost your follow-up, because typically you should have good debuffs on your party. Panic Manor, for example, and all of that. And then, because he has a debuff, you hit him twice, you proc Gale Force with Lunge, and you just screw someone over. He's very good like that. Seliph is a enemy phaser, for the most part, but he's a very solid one. Essentially, unless it's something like Trazir, who has a guaranteed follow-up, or not guaranteed follow-up, but is able to do our follow-up instantly after, you can just basically be like, oh yeah, but hit, and then you kill them, basically. Unless they have something like null follow-up. Trazir, again, blocks your follow-up because of her weapon, which is fucking annoying for Seliph, but for the most part, Seliph is very solid like this. I do think he's definitely worse than Rid, but he's definitely solid enough to bring enough to the table. His weapon is also very good to combo into Mirabilis. Shocking. And he provides his own sustain, so because his weapon provides you sustain, what you can just do as a result is just, you know, focus on damage with Ignis, which is something that a lot of tank that heals themselves can do. Next up is Legendary Erika, which is another Gale Forcer. One of the better user of Gale Force, in fact, because her attack is not as insane as Rid. But the thing is, Rid is better for heavy-duty killing, whereas Erika kind of requires the enemy not to be too damaging. What? To not do too much damage to her. She can also be used as a Black Luna user, and obviously, because Moonbow with her unique B skill basically becomes Black Luna. Except it's a better Black Luna because the damage you get, the 50% def increase to your attack, that's true damage. Meaning, even if you have like so much def and you're on a def tile, that it would basically make so that Black Luna is not so bad. Here, Erika is just going to do true damage instead, and just bitch slap you for the fucking defense that she ripped off from you anyway. Which, equals a lot of cases of, hey, I'm dealing with a 90 def unit and I still one-shot despite doing 0 damage. It's very silly, but it's kind of just how it is. It's literally better Black Luna as a result, and you get 2 charge when you initiate, which is very useful to set up Black Luna. Gale Force is the main thing she's known for, though, because her weapon basically means you don't need Heavy Blade, which is very solid. But even with me saying this, she's overall fairly awkward. purely because you need to be away from your allies for this, which is very strange and not very in character for Erika, but you have to be out of range of your allies to be able to get that follow-up, which sometimes can be very annoying and trips you over. Next up is Lif. Lif is, for the most part, a worse Dual Alphonse, because Dual Alphonse gets a cooldown -1 effect. For the most part, his pref is okay, and it does basically give him a bold fighter effect. But the second you have anything that blocks follow-ups, unless you are really good on speed, you typically will not be able to do your follow-up anyway, which is kind of awkward for him. And also, in general, it's just better to have Slaying Edge, because his unique B skill will basically make so if you get hits, he instantly proc his, you know, his unique special. I don't remember the name. I think it's Open the Future, which is overall very solid. It basically is Bonfire, but it also heals him, which is overall extremely solid for Lif. But with his pref and DC, it just doesn't work nearly as well as if you have a Slaying Edge. And Slaying Edge also allows you to patch one of the stats you want with a Refine, which is pretty solid, without also killing your allies, which is, you know, tends to be useful. And a lot of people point out the fact that, oh, you can, it's fine though, because you can actually, like, set up Desperation that way, but it's so awkward. And in a lot of positions, you might actually hurt an ally you don't want to see hurt, because that's another tank or anything of the sort, which is extremely annoying. And that's kind of why I don't like his pref all that much. His B skill is amazing. It's a -5 attack and defense, if memory serves. And it also gives him an extra charge when he gets hit. Which, again, if it was on his pref like Dimitri, would not be good, but because you can actually combo this into a slaying weapon, it's actually insanely good. It basically opens up a lot of combo, and also it makes so that if you don't want to use Brave Lucina, you can actually avoid using Brave Lucina, which can be useful for something such as AA. Just pointing out the obvious here. If you have to deal with something like Legendary Leaf, he is a good answer to him, for example. Not Leaf, Alm. Leaf might actually just straight up kill him, but because of the -5 attack, that depends on the build. Sometimes you'll be able to just, you know, deal with Leaf, actually, because of that special. Because keep in mind, it is Bonfire. It is Bonfire, and it does also lower your enemy's defense because of the B skill. And you get to also have Sustain. So as long as you're able to tank one hit, and you instantly proc it with Slaying Edge, bruh, you're kinda in business. It's a really, really good effect. Next up is Legendary Marv, or as I like to call him, Legendary Roy, but actually not shit. First off, he actually buffs Res, which is one of the things that's for some reason not on all season. I believe it's only 3 seasons, and he's the best user of it. I mean, there's Legendary Azura, of course, but it kind of depends on the situation. And Legendary Azura is very in demand. You'll be using her on like any team, so trying to specifically make a team around Water Bless with Res in mind is kind of awkward to work with. The other ones are Gunthra, which is literally the best unit if you want to pair her up with a penalty team, because she will buff Res, which makes it more consistent to ploy or sabotage, and she also has a weapon that benefits from said penalty, a B skill that provides penalty as well. So, you know, comboing her into Saizo, into Loot, into Matthew, into Broadleaf Fan is absolutely amazing. So, you know, there's that. And then the last one is Legendary Marv, which is more like a one-size-fit-all kind of unit. The reason why he's better than Legendary Roy, by the way, despite having basically the same stat line, is very simple. Legendary Marv, first off, gets a unique special. Instead of something like Renewal and Human Virtue, Jesus Christ. Oh my god, I can't believe Human Virtue is all he's got. Like, wow, dude. If you're adjacent to someone, you get 6 attack and speed. I guess I'm going to talk about Roy as well here. But yeah, his C skill is very underwhelming. They basically have the same stat line. Roy has a DC weapon with bonus doubler, whereas Marv has speed plus 3 in his weapon, bonus doubler, and then DC in the A skill. Or actually, I'm not sure if he has DC in his base kit, but I believe you can just give him DC and like he's absolutely amazing with it. Actually, no, he doesn't have it. I don't remember what he has. I just know he has Infantry Flash and something else. Binding Shield and something else, I think. But yeah, it's just in general. Hero. Wait, is it Hero Shield? Trying to think of his special. I might be confusing it with Young Morph, but essentially what his special does is 30% of his speed. It's not as good as Ira for damage, but it also provides support for your entire party, which is pretty useful. So yeah, that special is very solid, and if you want to make him a damage dealer, you can just combo this into Slaying Edge and Wrath. This is very much doable. Otherwise, you can just use his pref, combo that into bonus doubler, have his special, and then combo this into, say, distant counter, another bonus doubler, or another, like, whatever the hell you want to have. The thing with Roy is that he's stuck with DC, and while DC can be useful, and you can use that in tandem with, say, Mirror Stance 3, and so on and so forth, it's a lot more awkward to work with in general, because bonus doubler is just a really good effect in general, right? You can combo this into, say, Legendary Eliwood, for example, and Roy is also very selfish. He does not really give any stats to anyone. He gives 3 HP and that's it. Marv gives 4 res. Res is one of the most annoying stat to get, and a lot of units have good speed, def, and attack, but not good res. So Marv is a lot more useful to those team comps. For example, Astrum has not god-awful res, but his res is a lot worse than everything else that he has. And if you combo this into Legendary Marv, you can fix his res, which is very useful and just in general makes Astrum more consistent. So yeah, in general I do think Marv has overall more freedom. The special is the main reason really, because again, you can just go DPS, or you can just go DC, or you can just go into a variety of ways. If we had a sword version of Flowing Lance, by the way, this would just be yet another reason why Roy is inferior. But yeah, Roy is basically more or less the same. It's just, I guess he has more freedom with DC instead of more freedom with bonus doubler. But keep in mind, Marv gets 3 speed with his weapon, Roy gets no stats. So, I mean, on that front, overall, Marv is just better. So, you know. And Human Virtue is not good. I mean, it's basically Joint Drive Attack Speed 4, I guess. But it's not a good skill. Well, not Drive, Joint Own, my bad. Joint Own Attack, Joint Own Speed are not good skill. They were good back then, but now they're like... Okay, but I have Joint Drive skills now. Why would I ever use Joint Own outside of scoring, I guess? It's just god-awful. God-awful. I really wish Human Virtue was better than it is, but it's just not. And it doesn't even buff all units. Whatever, dude. Next up is Legendary Ryoma. Oh, also, I just realized I covered Roy, even though I already had covered him. Whatever. Legendary Ryoma. Here's the main problem. You give a DC weapon to a flying unit. I just want to point this out, but remember Legendary Grima and how there is an IoT shield that also have another effect as the A skill? You know Altina gets rid of flyer effectiveness with her A skill, right? This is why they're good. Or at least this is why Grima used to be good, but then, you know, Gen 5 happened, I guess. and the fact that you require merges for her to have any purpose. Seriously, she is requiring merges at this point, which is very awkward. But yeah, Ryoma basically, if you have to deal with flyers, you need to have IoT Shield, but then if you have IoT Shield, you don't have the res you want to have to deal with mages. So it's like, you lose either way, it's just that the thing you lose because of differs, and that's just... wahoo! What the hell am I doing with this? It's one of the most awkward legendary, and I think it's genuinely, like, if you're considering everyone on an actual tier list and not with the fact that, hey, if there's a unit that does what you're doing better, then you're trash, because that's why Ike is at the bottom. I do think Legendary Ryoma would be at the bottom. Bushido is not a good B skill. It's basically bootleg Wrath because it doesn't give you the charge. And it's even more bootleg when you compare this to Spurn. Because Spurn does all of the extra true damage, but also 40% damage reduction based on speed, like, bruh. And he can't use it because he's flying, so... yay! It's just not great. Like, at best, typically you use Fire Sweep or Slaying on him. You don't use his Pref, because his Pref just doesn't do enough. And in general, he's just outclassed by most Sword Flyer when it comes down to offense. Don't get me started on Elincia, especially with the fact that she might just get a Resplendent at one point, so, you know. Next up is Sophis. Sophis is okay, but she runs into, well, two problems. Fallen Corrin. Fallen Corrin was basically the same thing as her, but colorless. How the hell do you think that she will fare when a certain legendary Corrin exists? The only thing she has to her name is the fact that she cancels Cancer, well, I mean, close enough, Dragon Effectiveness. That's it. That's it. For the rest of the... for everything else, she's basically just Corrin, but again. And that's kind of a shame. Also DC in the Pref, which means you can use A skills, such as, again, Mirror Stance 3, blah blah blah, you get the point. It's not amazing overall. It's okay, but it's not amazing. Let me just check with my blue units. I did cover Fjorm, so Legendary Ephraim. Legendary Ephraim is a fantastic one-off. Or used to, anyway. He used to be a pretty good Gale Force unit with Heavy Blade. The problem he runs into now is just the fact that a lot of things will block follow-ups unless you have enough speed. And the meta is a lot more green and colorless. And the few units that aren't either of these are something like Legendary Crom, which you can't do shit against with Ephraim. Ephraim is just going to get ransacked in one hit. This makes him fairly unwieldy overall, but I mean, you can still use him as a Gale Force unit in stuff such as Grand Conquest, I suppose. As horse units there are basically at their best. This is the best place for horse units in general. Next up is Legendary Azura. What do I have to say here? Honestly, she is on the cusp of getting to S+ tier. I do think she is a fantastic unit, annoying in both player's hand or enemy's hand. And her buffs are very good. The problem with the buffs, however, is the fact that there's a lot of buff negations at this point, which does hurt her utility a lot when you're the one using her. At least in stuff like AA and AR, where you'll typically have to deal with people who have actually built their units. If you have to deal with LOLs, I mean, the buffs are not nearly as useful, but they are still going to be useful for at least 2 stats. It's just overall not amazing overall. This is the main reason why she's in S tier and not S+. As for Legendary Crom, I've said this before, I'll say it again. Legendary Crom is an annoying piece of shit to deal with. However, if it's in the end of the player, he is not nearly as useful. Because you have to understand, from the AI's perspective, if they kill one of your unit, they win. So, no matter how suicidal the play, if they end up killing a unit as a result, they win. Basically, because then you have to reset your run, because you lost so much point for that one death that it's just not worth it anymore. So, you know, as a result, it's just the more suicidal the unit, the better. And Crom is extremely suicidal, repoing people out of danger just so he can just initiate on your units. And also, he's typically tied with Legendary Azura, which gives movement. Which, by the way, the movement is the reason why she's in S tier, in case you couldn't tell. But yeah, it makes Crom very annoying to deal with. And, you know, if you lose a unit, you're basically gone. Whereas if you're the one playing, you can't be this suicidal with Crom. Like, yeah, you can kill a unit that way, but if you get killed for it, your run's also over. So that's the kind of whole idea. He is still useful, and this is the main reason why he's useful in the end of the player, with the fact that he has a glorified 500 SP repo skill, so you can just repo people out of danger and then just move away, which in a lot of cases means you don't even need a dancer for arena, which is very useful for, I mean, very obvious reason. I don't think I have to explain why that is. That said, repo can be a bit of a problem to use, because sometimes, depending on the map, you can't repo them there because it's a mountain or a forest and you have a cave or whatever. I think you get what I'm trying to get to. It's overall very solid, just, you know, in the end of the player, not being able to be nearly as suicidal is making the unit a bit less good. By the way, in case you couldn't tell, the tier list is mostly in the end of the player, because in the end of the player is typically where you're going to be taking the most advantage of them. If you're in AR defense, for example, you will not gain, like, obviously Legendary Azura is going to be great in AR defense, but I mean, it's mostly because Dancer, you know. Anyway, Legendary Lucina's next. Very similar to her dad, except she's using Swap, which is way rarer to get tripped by for some reason. The AI is very strange with Swap, that's mostly why. I think you basically need to have a unit that's basically in the attack range. And, you know, there's behind that unit is not in the attack range, so Lucina will just swap in to get her out of the attack range, kind of deal. Which is very rare to really have to deal with, thankfully. But, yeah. Legendary Lucina can use Swap, and in a lot of ways, Swap can actually help a lot more than Repo. Reposition with Crom can be very useful, but like I said, terrain can screw you over. Whereas Swap, it will just not happen. Unless for some reason there's a forest there, but it's a lot less common that you get tripped over because of that skill. So that does help a lot. And you can swap twice, so that can be useful to get a unit out of danger or an armored unit to move. Because you'll be able to swap them twice, right? Repo will basically move them for 2 square, right? But you don't really get to have much control on where they go. Swap, however, you do. Because you can just be like, okay, 1 up, 1 left. Or 2 up. Or 1 up, 1 right. You know, you basically have the freedom of where the unit ends up at, which can be very useful. Obviously, you can also use Link with her, Link skills, which is very solid. And her weapon gives her 4 across the board against anything that's like melee range, I believe. Not sure if it affects beast units, but I believe it does. So it can be very useful. 4 across the board is not to be underestimated. It's definitely a lot worse than Crom in terms of set in general, but also the fact that she gives speed, and she's the best user of giving speed, by the way. For those who don't know, there's only 3 characters that give speed for legendaries, because again they did not bother to finish that shit. just like Rez. Fjorm and Grima, which I think we can all both safely say they are not worth building. And the last one being Legendary Asina, so, you know, and speed being as good as it is very useful in a lot of scenarios. So yeah, that makes her fairly solid. Next up is Legendary Julia. Legendary Julia is basically a one-hit nuke. I do think she's going to get a lot, and I do mean a lot better once we get a Blue Fox Dome. That's probably going to make her jump up to S- at the very least, because this will allow her to have a whole lot of speed while still being able to use Sturdy Impact, which basically makes her a pain in the ass, because she's going to be effectively able to push for 50 speed, which is very annoying to deal with when you have a unit with, like, give or take 80 attack behind it. Which, you know, and it also finally makes use of Light and Dark. The problem with Julia is that Light and Dark does not really help her. All she needs is attack and res, basically. So, hey, -3 attack, -3 res, you're good to go. And guess what? That's low attack res, and it's just better than Light and Dark for her when it comes down to one-shotting. But if you actually want to invest in her speed with like Swift Sparrow 3, for example, or Steady Impact, I guess, and you don't want to use the Fox Dome, I guess at that point it can actually kind of work. The problem is just, if they have a follow-up, they will be able to do one. And you probably won't. Outside of Steady Impact, of course. So yeah, overall pretty decent. As for Peony, it's a dancer. It gives aerobatics, which allow you to move around a bit easier. It gives 3 across the board, and anyone in cardinal direction gets 3 attack and speed. Wahoo! Like I said when I covered Mirabilis, Mirabilis is overall better, in my opinion. Because, first off, there's a lot of ways to get buffs, and typically you'll have Legendary Azura to go with Peony, so that 3 across the board is kind of wasted. So thankfully, you can get the 3 across the board for units that are very far away from you, because it basically gives it to anyone in cardinal direction of you and the target unit that you just danced. So it can be useful in that vein, but while I do say that, it's still not ideal overall. Because, again, there's just better buffs, and typically buffing the dude that's at the other side of the map will not give you much of a purpose or anything in general. So, you know. Tiki I've already covered, so I'm going to skip her. Next up is Naga. Naga is a absolute atrocious set. Now, credit where credit is due, her with a Brave Boy is a good counter to Legendary Corrin. Wahoo. That's cool. The problem she has is the fact that for her to get stats, she requires to have Dragon Killers within 2 range. A bit iffy to work with, and limits your party option a lot, unless you use her C skill. The problem with her C skill is that it's not for allies within 2 space, it's for adjacent allies, which means a Versa will screw you over, which also means that, you know, if you go into attack and you can't put the unit around her to get the Dragon Killer effect, she effectively gets fuck all. So that's yet another thing that makes it very awkward to work with. And also she has, like, no movement option. Like, I've said this before, Lilith is just a better realized Naga, because she just gets 5 across the board if her support ally is within 3 space of her, which is so easy to fulfill. And she can just, like, teleport to the said ally on top of it, which gives her, like, a lot of option in general. Naga has only a pref and a unique C skill that's fairly awkward to begin with, and is basically the remnant of a dead era. Ooh boy, Dragon Killers, sure need those. It's just very silly in general. I just don't understand what they were thinking with that, personally. If it was within 2 space, it would work a lot better. Being able to get 9 across the board very easily as a result would be very good in the end as a player, shit in the end of the AI for obvious reasons. The AI will not line up their units to get the buff as a result, so you will just be worse. So, yeah. Hell, I've already covered. I've covered her and Legendary Edelgard in the last video, as well as Trazir. So, moving on to Legendary Hector. Legendary Hector is pointless. There is a number of units that will do everything he can do but better. For example, if you use, well, Legendary Edelgard beats Legendary Hector in every stats. Has more BST, has a unique B skill that allows her to go again. Her pref blocks follow-up just like Hector, but also do -6 attack and def, so I mean, at that point, the stat difference between Legendary Hector and Edelgard might as well be roughly 17 points, which is insane. Actually, no, 23 points, because the -6 attack and defense is like 6 def, 6 res, 6 attack, so 18 points plus 5 BST. It is kind of insane when you think of it this way, right? So yeah, it's just Edelgard just does everything Hector could do better and has more options. It's not amazing, I'll just say that. So as a result, Hector is kind of a waste. They're also both fire seasons, so that just doesn't help. Like, it just basically Legendary Edelgard just made Legendary Hector pointless. If you already have him at +10, I mean, he's gonna get the job done, at the very least. But the fact that he has that Edelgard has an SP bin, a BST bin, a much better pref, kind of makes Legendary Hector pointless. So, yeah. Next up, Legendary Celica. Legendary Celica is a very simple one to really talk about. She's basically Legendary All, but magic and green. She is a bit more annoying because of her B skill, which is basically just better null follow-up because it also has Desperation. That means if you fail to kill her and she gets Dance, you're in trouble. She's basically going to just kill whatever she's going to have to deal with. Which can be very annoying. And just in general, like, Alm is better by like 2 tiers, because not having to deal with colors is huge. But don't take that away from Celica. Celica is still amazing. It's just Alm has so many options because he has a unique special to combo into other things, whereas Celica is kind of just stuck with her pref and B skill. Next up, Gunthra. As I said, she is a fantastic combo piece. Keep in mind, by herself, she is trash. Okay? However, if you use her in tandem with something like Loot, Sizo, Matthew, Sabotage users, anything of the sort, and also Mirabilis, by the way, is a very good combo into her also. Like, Mirabilis is a good combo piece to go into Gunthra, who's also a combo piece. Because the idea is that you buff the res of people that would ploy and sabotage, so it's easier to get penalties in. And because it's easier to get penalties in, our pref has more value. And she has also her B skill to bring her own debuffs. And because debuffs are up, and Loot is now more consistent, gets 4 across the board easier, or Sabotage is more consistent also because she gets 4 res, you get the idea. She is a combo enabler. By herself she doesn't work, but she is a good combo enabler. Trazir is insanely good. Honestly, it's really funny, right? When I made my video on Dimitri, people were talking about how, well, one person in particular, which I ended up having to just remove from my channel because he was getting to a point that was extremely toxic, and I believe he just removed all of his comments. Anyway, that person was saying how Dimitri was able to deal with Trazir and Brahman, and really he doesn't. A +0 Brahman will give trouble to a +10 Dimitri. Dimitri will win, but Brahman will get him down to like a quarter of his HP. And then at that point, anything kills him very easily, so, you know. But yeah, Trazir is a lot better. Getting rid of any effect that can guarantee people, that can give people guaranteed follow-up with a weapon is insane, and a lot of people doesn't seem to realize this, but sturdy impact with her basically means that the enemy need to outspeed you to be able to double. Because the weapon will block stuff like Blue Lion Rule, Quick Riposte, and so on. And then you have an impact skill to block follow-up on top of it. It is extremely annoying to deal with. That said, on lower merges, speed can be a bit iffy, but at the same time, you still have 49 speed. If you have a speed plus Trazir, that's 53 speed. So at that point, you can just have sturdy impact and be just fine in a lot of cases. Especially with killing intent. Honestly, I might just push her up to S-, because in AR she is very frustrating to deal with as a result. Just not being able to get guaranteed follow-up is really annoying, and since nobody uses sturdy impact, it's not as annoying to deal with, because it's just like, well, okay, I can still just outspeed you or just kill you outright with something like Legendary Leaf. But no, just Trazir will just not care with sturdy impact, which makes her really solid. Next up is Yoon. Here the problem with her is the fact that essentially your entire kit revolves on you having a penalty, and she has a C scale that has an insane range to inflict a penalty. Here's the problem though. It gives 6 attack and a follow-up. It doesn't block follow-up, so that's kind of odd considering that came several months after Rid, I think, or actually maybe just a month after. I'm not sure. She also buffs speed, by the way, which can be useful in your AR defense, because speed, if you get 4 speed from her, it makes Peony a lot less impactful to deal with you. But yeah, Yoon's problem is the fact that it requires the map to be vertical. That works in AR, it does, but outside of AR, if you're in Arena and you get a map that's horizontal, so you can't debuff them easily, Yoon is going to be dead weight at best, and so that makes her very inconsistent. Next up is Lin. Lin is... Oh, and also another thing about Yoon, she can hit really hard, but she kind of needs sturdy impact to even function, because her def is just that bad. And you don't really need any specific counter against her. Any bow will basically destroy her. Lin is... You know, if Ryoma was not a thing, I would say Lin is the worst legendary, but Ryoma is kind of a thing, so... You know. Lin here is a mistake. She can kind of work, and she can, to be fair, with heavy support, kind of deal with Chrom, as long as he doesn't have impact. And you might need some support, as in like drive attack and so on and so forth, to actually deal with Chrom. But you get like 9 attack with the Pref, and the Pref itself is 14, so it's a way to kind of deal with, because you'll have 54 attack against Chrom because color advantage. Which is still not bad. If you have low attack def, it basically makes her a pretty good consistent counter to Chrom. But if she has impact, you're kind of fucked. As is a lot of option. The only option that's consistent in dealing with Chrom is Rinka. At least without like a million premium skill. Like, oh, my Echidna can deal with Chrom with Spurn and everything. And I'm like, yeah. You use premium skills. Do you want to do that like another 6 times? Also plus 10 the unit? I don't know, but I don't. Anyway, here comes the 2 big boys. Legendary Alm and Legendary Leaf. Legendary Alm is a pretty simple one. Lunar Flash. I've pointed this before, and I'll point it again. But when it comes down to Legendary Alm, and I've said this in my original video about him, and this is a set I never see for some reason, but what you can do is just use Brave Bow, okay? Oh, Jay, why are you removing, like, what makes him good? Whoa, that's so strange. Yeah, the thing is, you have to realize, if you use something like Life and Death Brave Bow, you can actually end up with quite a bit of speed. So you can then use Flashing Blade or Heavy Blade. So the idea is that you'll hit and then proc Lunar Flash. Lunar Flash is a lot of damage, and while your speed is lowered with Brave Bow, it is not enough to really matter. Look, you could lose 10 speed, you lose 3 whole damage for it. Nobody cares, okay? Nobody cares. The idea is just to hit proc, and having 2 hits kind of makes you, like, hit really hard. And because Alm has a lot of attack, if you have, like, Life in the 4, or Attack Speed Push 4, but that one is kind of iffy because you'll recoil yourself to death. If you have Life in the 4, Brave Bow, Attack Plus, you're basically at 54 attack. With an attack buff, you're at 60 attack. This is unmerged, by the way. And you'll proc Lunar Flash on the second hit every time. So yeah. Very solid. Also, this is counting a buff. Not sure if I mentioned that, but this is counting a buff. And also, you can use still your B slot. So you can still have low attack def with this. So you can effectively have 63 attack, proc on the second hit every time, Lunar Flash, hit really hard, and on top of that, like, your attack is going to be, your speed is still very solid, I mean. And you can have Joint Drive attack if you want to really go ham, and then Merges and Flowers can also push it even further. You're going to have, with low attack def, you have 63, Merges and Flowers 69. So yeah, 69 attack. Yeah. Hit proc. It's very dangerous. Another thing with Lunar Flash that I also pointed out in that video, like long time ago, AoEs. Because the true damage effect works on AoEs. So the idea is you use Flashing Blade or Flashing Blade 4. Flashing Blade 4 is a really good one, because you can have good speed, and then you can just, like, you know, get 5 true damage from this. The pref, like, say you're dealing with someone with 50 def. The pref will give you 12 true damage, Flashing Blade 4 will give you 5 true damage, and then you still have, like, a few slots open. That said, typically Life and Death 4 will do you better for AoEs, because then you'll get 10 damage from it instead of 5. So yeah, you can have a whole lot of attack with this, and the idea is just you proc the AoE, you get true damage on top of it, so you hit really hard, you get in fight, you get again the true damage on your first hit. So yeah, it's very potent as a result. It's kind of like the same idea of Gangrel using AoEs to combo into his pref. And then there's also the basically base kit but with low attack def. That's also really annoying to deal with. And if he has attack plus, he typically hits so much attack, it's very difficult to just tank him, even for one hit. He might, even if you're tanking for one hit, he might just one-shot you, basically. So yeah. Overall phenomenal unit. It gives him a lot of option, and like I said, Brave Celica does not have a Brave weapon. Brave Celica cannot really use... Well, I guess she can kind of use AoEs. The problem with that, though, is that you still have to deal with color. And, yeah. Also, Alm is colorless, so, you know, kind of useful. As for Legendary Leaf, one of the most explosive unit in terms of offense and defense. Keep in mind you can use him with Moonbow or Neuron Zeal, it really depends on what you're doing. The idea is if you have Moonbow, you can basically combo this into Brave Lucina. have Vantage. Vantage procs, you hit back, you proc Moonbow every single time. It's a lot of damage and it's completely free. You can also use Ruptured Sky if you think dragons are going to be a threat or beasts. Up to you, really. Both special kind of works. And Leaf hits a ton of attack. If you have Attack Plus, that's also a super boon. I believe at Max Merge and Max Flowers, you end up with something like about 56 base attack. So if you use Close Counter with Fierce Stance or Close Foil, but that's really a bad idea if you have to deal with dragons. If you use Close Counter with a buff and Fierce Stance, of course, and Max Merges, you'll typically have about 68 attack with a Brave Bow on enemy phase. So Vantage proc with Moonbow is extremely annoying to deal with, and it becomes a game of deal with the RD bearing unit and you win. Straight up. It is a very strong effect for something like AR, Vantage Tank. As far as Vantage Tanks are concerned, Legendary Leaf is the absolute best at it. Being able to have 2 free hits when you're colorless and you have that much attack is just insane. And if you're looking also on offense, you can also... I've made a speedy Leaf that actually hits over 50 speed. It's very much possible, and that's with Attack Plus, by the way. He is also the best Roker Siege, yeah, I think it's Roker Siege. Roker Siege unit, because all he needs is a bit of speed and he starts squatting with like 70-80 attack. It's insane. So that makes him one of the best unit there. Keep in mind, though, I say this, but like Roker Siege is not that important, obviously. I'm just saying this as it's something he can do. Another thing a lot of people use him as is just basically an initiator with, you know, just Neuron Zeal. Typically used with Raphael, by the way, or Veloria, because Raphael will give him the 1 charge that he's gonna need, so he doesn't have to have the Estus Flask B slot. So what ends up happening is you have the charge, you hit, Gale Force proc, basically, you go again and you kill another unit, typically to deal with something like Hardy Bearing. If your Leaf is merged high enough, you might prefer this that way, just so you can like snipe 2 units while setting up for Vantage, basically. Just getting rid of of 2 problematic units, essentially, and just enemy phase the rest afterward. It's pretty useful in general. Leaf is just insanely strong as a result. In the end of the AI, he's a lot worse, because you can't really use a Close Counter Vantage all that well with AI, but that's fine, because in the end of the player is where the unit should shine the most, because that's where you see them at work. If I win an AR Def, I'm not going to be like, man, Nino is OP, or Scattered Fang Nino anyway. I'm not going to be that way. I'm just like, it's funny. You know? It's not something I've been in control, so I don't feel like I've accomplished anything. It's the same kind of concept here. At least, to me. I know some people may not feel that way, but that's just how it is. Next up is Brahman, who is one of the most painful units to have to deal with. Guaranteed follow-up, 5 attack, def, and res, effectively, with a pref. Makes him just really annoying to kill. Especially with Impenetrable Dark, which is a C skill, makes so you cannot get any support. Brave Lucina is gone, there's nothing you can do with that, which makes it very awkward to deal with. Typically, for most units, they'll have to take both hit, if they have something like Spurn and actual good res, unlike Dimitri. I'm not trying to just shit on Dimitri, but that's like... Brahman and Trazir were the 2 units I had to argue the most about what Dimitri could handle, and Brahman is effectively a unit he cannot deal with consistently. Basically, it requires Dimitri to have like 100 attack or so, and it's just ridiculous. In a lot of cases, there's just no way for him to do that, because you can't have drives, can't have Yato, can't have Kaden. The only thing you can have are blessing and an attack buff, which Brahman is low attack res in his base kit, so you kinda can do 1+1, I think. Brahman is just really annoying to deal with. You cannot basically buff with allies outside of actual in-game buff, in-combat buffs, but the only stat he can really buff is speed, which just makes him able to double you easier. So like the only thing you can really do to deal with this is have something like Marita or have no follow-up. So yeah, otherwise you have to take 2 hits, and he hits really hard. Even without an attack buff, he can hit like over 70 attack. It's ridiculous. Utterly ridiculous. Next up is Milla. I'm just going to alternate between the two since it alternates. Milla is basically one of the least important light blessing units. She is very good at dealing and dispatching dancers, and while yes, that is definitely very useful, the stat she provides is not nearly as useful. She gives 5 defense and 5 HP, which, I'm sorry to say, but a lot of units are lacking in res, not defense. So, you know, as a result, air just has more purpose, and she's free, so there's no real reason to go for Milla. Milla has a good utility with her isolation and can definitely help also in the AA depending on the season. The problem, however, when it comes down to Milla is, well, in a lot of AA maps, there is no way for you to set up your unit to actually proc isolation, and it's really hard for you to just put the unit in such a way for the second turn to also hit isolation. So it can be very awkward to work with, because you have to understand, you have to have a deep understanding of the AI and how it moves, and even then you might get tripped over here and there, so it's kind of awkward to work with. Also, we're starting to get dancers with an actual def stat like Eldigan, so that's a bit awkward. Keep in mind Tethys with blessings, because Milla cannot gain from blessings, and this is really important. Since Milla cannot gain from any blessings, this basically means that the enemy can have blessing, you can't. So if you have something like Tethys, who run Temari on the enemy team, who's blessed by like one or two Mythic that buffs defense, I'm sorry to say, but you'll probably not hit isolation on her, because Tethys can actually have a really good def stat, and with 2 units that buff defense, she can hit easily over 50. So as a result, it's not really great. Still, she's overall fairly solid overall. Just, you know, like I said, a bit awkward on the buffing effect. Not the buffing effect, isolation effect. That said, she also has a buff, which is basically map-wide. Goodbye, base Marv? But that effect is really good, and one of the main reasons why she's good. It is a bit awkward to use, because you're like, oh, I have a buffer. That's cool. I want to buff with it. I'm gonna bring drives. Oh wait, that's within 2 space, so I can't really make use of the dummy thick, like, range of her buffs. So, it's kind of a give and take. It's kind of a shame, but that's kind of what it is. Next up is Air. Air is, I mean, gonna be honest, as far as the unit goes, Air is, she's aight. I mean, she has a good res stat for Temari to function as a support unit while also providing HP and res to units. And like I said, a lot of unit needs HP and res, and mostly just res. Like for example, Dimitri, if you want to use him, better bet your ass you're going to want to have an air or 2, because that res ain't existing. So there's that. And there's a lot of units that can really abuse this. And even if you have like an air but not a Milla, you can, and the unit has like even stats. What ends up happening is you can just use something like sturdy stance to make up for the def you don't have. Simple as that. Or attack def solo whenever that becomes a thing. Next up is Grima. Probably should have looked at my list of characters I've actually talked about. Because, well, I mean... Oh yeah, that's right. Last month we had Fallen Corrin. Fallen female Corrin on the banner. Man, I hope no one invested in that shit. Because, that became useless real quick. Anyway, when it comes down to female Grima, she is a unit that requires high investment. Just like Fjorm, if you are like an unmerged version of her, she typically will not help you. She typically will not do great. She's just very awkward to work with in general, because you just don't get enough stats to work with, and this is Gen 2, of course, so, you know, Flyers now have 10 more points of stats, so... makes her even less interesting. Especially since now, if you're a Flyer, you're either Claude or you're a melee Flyer that can use Pegasus Flight or Rain skills, or both together, especially in tandem with Flowing Lance or Dex Swabber. And sadly, Grima can use absolutely one of those things, which is the Rain skills, and nothing else. Which, wow, that's a bit iffy, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, that's just kind of how it is. She is overall a fairly meh unit. And next up is Douma. Douma's kind of trash, not gonna lie. In a lot of cases, it doesn't do a whole lot. Armored units in AR are not very good. Even if you put them in the fucking corner, that's not gonna help you in 9 times out of 10. His effect is underwhelming. It should do -6 attack and res. Oh, sorry, I'm yawning because it's like 5 AM almost. But yeah, Douma, essentially, upheaval. If you have to deal with something with a healing tower and you don't break it, upheaval's useless, so the weapon just doesn't work. If you have to deal with an air, because it's a bonus season with air is just going to be a straight out counter and there's nothing you can do. The weapon should have done -6 attack and res, because that way it would have actually given him a better bulk and worked better with Def Res solo. The pref only blocks follow-up, by the way. It does not give him any follow-up, so you have to be initiating with Bolt Fighter, which is not exactly ideal. And then you have to also realize, you know, just like the generic Tiki, which I did not talk because I spoke about in the other video, is a dragon armor. But unlike the generic Tiki, who can use Special Fighter, Douma cannot use Special Fighter. So that makes him a pretty shit fighter. And or just literally any armored unit in existence that has Bolt Fighter. Also, Kindness exists. Kindness has an infinitely better pref. The pref also has DC. It's like a DC pref with 4 across the board. Do I have to explain why that's better? I don't think I do, but you know. His speed is actually salvageable to use Special Fighter. He's also a lot easier to get, because he's not a legendary, or mythic in this case. And yeah, Kindness is just overall better. So yeah, I think that's about all the characters. This is already 1 hour and 40 minutes. Bruh, I'm not even covering the banner itself. Imagine if I had to cover the banner itself, this video would have been over 2 hours. Jesus Christ. But yeah, hopefully this was informative, because this is my final tier list update. Keep in mind, if you want to have information about my tier lists and everything, it is something that I'm going to be keeping up to date on my Gamepedia page. Link is going to be in the description below, of course. So if you want to have a second opinion on characters, don't expect them to be like added right away for obvious reason. I have a real life to take care of, obviously. But for the most part, I'm going to try to upkeep it like every month. So yeah. As for the Sacred Seal tier list, I'll try to find a way to add an image to the page, which also will be an easy reference for people who want to have an easy reference without going to one of my videos for, you know, the information. But yeah, Legendary Corrin is fucking dreadful to deal with, and hopefully you have enough of those premium counter, because you know what is in common with every unit I mentioned? None of them are 3 to 4 star, because if you want a 3 to 4 star to deal with her, you have to be heavily investing into them and their speed. So, awkward, to say the least. But yeah, I hope this was informative, and you have a good grasp of what make a character work and what doesn't here. It's going to sound cliche, but it feels very weird to know that after this, what I'm basically known for on YouTube will basically cease to exist. Because I'm obviously going to still make something like Show Me Your Build, maybe like showcasing teams, and so on and so forth. You know, a lot of things that are going to be more fun for me. I don't know about you guys, but I just... Analytical content is always so difficult to do. And, man, it's just a pain. It's just a pain to do. When you have also a real life, you're teaching, you're also learning. You just don't have a whole lot of time to yourself. I'm going to be able to just spend time with friends again and just watch anime with friends. And, well, probably just do a watch along on Discord of... I think we're going to start with Avatar: The Last Airbender, because I've never watched that show. I've been wanting to watch that show for 1.5 years, but never could because I just didn't have time. So, yeah, that's probably going to be the first one we're going to watch. I'm going to try to find a way to add roles through a bot for people to be able to just be able to want to have a role to just watch something like anime, or just want to be there for streams or something similar, basically. But yeah, that's everything I wanted to cover before I left. Obviously there's the Sacred Seal tier list update I still have to do, but the thing with Sacred Seal tier list update is that it is so much less effort to just have to update the tier list itself than it is to make a video, so that certainly will help. But yeah, this is me closing a chapter that was over 2 years of my life, which is just working on this channel and being extremely unhealthy to make it to deadlines. And yeah, God, that feels weird. God, that feels so weird. Obviously I'm still going to be streaming Heroes. I'm not going to go anywhere, though. I'm not trying anymore for Arena for a very obvious reason. It is just too frustrating to do. Just too many units like Corrin, like... Look, let me just put it this way. You have an Arena core, yes? What do you do if something like Legendary Corrin pops out and you have literally no counters to her? Okay, you're going to plus 10 a unit to deal with that unit? I mean, it's an option, but it's pretty yikes. Actually, technically, I guess I could use Blue Flame on Naga to do a counter to Corrin, but that's far from ideal to say the least. But yeah, I think that's... this is like the 5th time I'm trying to end the video, but I just can't. Yeah. If you still want my opinions on stuff, you can just join Discord. Obviously, there's Twitch. If you want me to review builds, again, that's typically on Twitch. Unless I do show me your build, then obviously that's going to be also an option. I don't think I'm going to be making that much content anymore, so if you think... If the only reason you've been there were to just, you know, for my analytical content, well, first off, thank you. I'm glad that you were there for the ride. And, I mean, you can safely unsubscribe. There's just no point for me anymore. I just... Between Heroes becoming the mess that it is, and between how expensive everything is to just even stay where I was, and between my mental health because working on videos, like, I just don't get any passion anymore for this. And it feels like I keep getting kicked in the dick. Also, if you... Talking about getting kicked in the dick, guess who pulled 23 Lachesis and not a single one was attack plus? That's right, it's me. I want to die. I managed to get a neutral Sigurd and Deirdre and a neutral Lachesis, but not an attack plus Lachesis in 23 units. I want my 70 attack, 50 speed, and like 50 def and res, dude. And before people ask for flowers, yeah, she would be like number 6 on the list with all of the Tempest Trial GHB unit I have to work on first. And it takes 2 months per character you want to change the stats on. What the fuck? They should have tripled the amount of that per week, but you get like 12 a week, by the way. You need 100 per change. And also, per change, I've said this already, but to me it should be you should be spending 100 100 of the IV fruit or whatever it's called, and then you unlock the ability to change IV at your leisure on the unit. That's how it should have been. Being a one-time use is asinine if you're going to ask for 2 months worth of resources. Jesus. Just another, like, example of poor implementation by IS, I suppose. But yeah, I think I've said everything I had to say. Have a nice one, everyone. And, I'll see you in the comments, I suppose. See ya.